It began quietly, so quietly that most people didn't even notice. A few offhand comments, a vague social media post, a screenshot shared in a private group chat, nothing that screamed scandal. Yet just suggestive enough to make those paying attention lean in a little closer. At first, it was the kind of rumor that drifts through the background like white noise. It's easily dismissed as exaggeration or fan-made fiction. But whispers have a way of multiplying, especially in an industry fueled by curiosity, competition, and hidden agendas. Someone mentioned seeing something they weren't supposed to see. Someone else claimed to have overheard a conversation that didn't sound innocent. And suddenly the rumor wasn't just background chatter, it was a spark catching dry leaves. Suspicion began rising slowly, almost imperceptibly. As fans started asking questions, bloggers crafted cryptic captions, and insiders refused to confirm nor deny anything, adding gasoline without ever striking a match. The energy shifted. People who once waved it off began to wonder, what if there was some truth? The whispers grew louder, turning into theories, then debates, then full-blown speculation. Even those closest to the situation started acting differently, avoiding direct answers, offering strained smiles, and posting strangely timed messages that only fueled more doubt. It didn't take long for the public to sense that something beneath the surface wasn't right. The calm before the storm transformed into a tension-filled silence where every glance, every post, every unexplained moment felt like a clue. What started as a tiny ripple was now building into a wave, moving fast, gathering power, and dragging in anyone connected to the rumor, whether they wanted involvement or not. And as the chatter spread from private conversations to public platforms, suspicion evolved into a collective obsession. People weren't just curious, they were invested, emotionally locked into the mystery, waiting for the first real piece of proof to break. No announcement had been made, no evidence confirmed, yet somehow the industry could feel it coming. A shift, a rupture, a moment that seemed destined to explode. And all of its every reaction, every assumption, every sudden shift traced back to a single quiet whisper that no one took seriously, until it was too late. What started as faint background noise suddenly transformed once fans locked in and began connecting dots that others had overlooked, turning curiosity into a full-scale investigation powered by social media's relentless energy. It began with small observations, odd glances caught on camera, unfamiliar tension in recent interviews, and subtle changes in body language that loyal followers immediately picked up on. Screenshots were shared, slowed-down video clips were analyzed like forensic evidence, and side-by-side comparisons began circulating online as people searched for patterns that suggested something deeper was unfolding behind the scenes. Hashtags emerged overnight. Digital detectives flooded comment sections with theories, and fan pages turned into war rooms buzzing with speculation. Every eyebrow raise, every paused breath, every awkward smile was dissected frame by frame. As viewers insisted, these weren't coincidences, but signs of an unspoken truth. The debates intensified when influencers, gossip bloggers, and fan analysts joined in, posting breakdowns, live stream reactions, and lengthy threads mapping out timelines that made the situation feel less like rumor and more like an impending revelation. People weren't just observing, they were choosing sides, defending interpretations, and challenging anyone who dismissed the signs as imagination. Online conversations grew heated, fueled by polls, memes, and receipts, while algorithm-driven feeds pushed the topic further into the spotlight, making it impossible to escape. Even silence became suspicious. Lack of denial was treated as confirmation, and every delayed post or canceled appearance was framed as evidence that the story was bigger than anyone first assumed. What made the moment explosive wasn't official proof, but the collective belief that something hidden was pushing its way to the surface. Fans felt smarter, empowered, and emotionally invested, convinced they were uncovering the truth before the public even knew there was a mystery to solve. The digital atmosphere shifted from mere curiosity to anticipation. as if everyone sensed they were on the brink of something major. And as conversations spilled from private group chats to mainstream platforms, the rumor evolved into a movement one too loud to ignore, too widespread to contain, and too intense to simply fade away. Suddenly, it wasn't just whispers anymore. It was a global echo demanding answers, and the world was watching, waiting, and convinced that whatever was happening behind the scenes was much bigger than anyone dared to admit. The moment the rumors bled into the workspace, everything changed. And the set, once buzzing with laughter, inside jokes, and routine chaos suddenly felt like a freezer where every breath carried tension. People who used to greet each other with easy smiles now exchanged stiff nods. Conversations that once flowed freely were reduced to clipped phrases, and a strange, heavy silence settled between cast members who seemed terrified to say the wrong thing. The energy shifted so dramatically that even newcomers could sense something was off. Nobody lingered, nobody relaxed, and everyone appeared hyper-aware of being watched, recorded, or misinterpreted. Crew members whispered in corners, eyes darting toward the rumored individuals, while producers walked around with forced calm, pretending nothing was wrong even though their tightened jaws and rushed movements said otherwise. The atmosphere grew colder each day as cast members began choosing sides without ever admitting they were doing so, some offering awkward support, others keeping their distance as if association alone could drag them into the storm. Scenes that once felt natural now looked strained, with body language revealing tension that dialogue couldn't hide. Hands trembled slightly, interactions lacked warmth, and moments that should have played effortlessly on camera appeared stiff and uncomfortable. Even breaks between filming became minefields as people avoided eye contact, skipped shared meals, and retreated to private spaces, afraid that any casual comment might end up fueling online speculation. The rumored pair moved differently, two more cautious, more guarded, offering each other brief glances that only heightened suspicion, while their attempts to act normal looked rehearsed, almost brittle. Directors sensed the shift and began rushing through takes, hoping to minimize uncomfortable moments. But their urgency only reinforced the idea that something was unraveling behind the scenes. Crew members started clocking the smallest details: late arrivals, quiet arguments, sudden exits, turning the set into a pressure cooker, where everyone was waiting for a crack loud enough to confirm what they feared. Even laughter, when it happened, sounded forced, echoing awkwardly in a space where trust had evaporated and paranoia took its place. And as the days passed, the cold didn't fade, it deepened, settling into the walls, the work, and the relationships that once felt solid, making it clear that the set was no longer just a workplace, but ground zero for a secret that was tightening its grip on everyone involved. When the whispers finally grew too loud to ignore, Mendeecees found himself standing at the edge of a moment he never imagined, facing a private confrontation that forced every buried fear, every quiet doubt, and every fragile piece of trust to the surface all at once. It didn't happen in front of cameras or crowds, but in a closed-off room thick with silence, where his heartbeat felt louder than any rumor outside. The questions he'd been avoiding now demanded answers, and the people he once trusted without hesitation suddenly felt like strangers, holding pieces of a truth he wasn't prepared to hear. His voice, usually steady and confident, shook as he asked the simplest question: what was real and what wasn't? And the pause before the response cut deeper than any words could. Emotion hit him in a way he couldn't disguise, anger flickering into disbelief, disbelief collapsing into hurt, and hurt settling into a kind of numbness that made the floor feel unsteady beneath him. Memories that once felt safe now replayed with suspicion. And every conversation, every look, every unexplained moment sharpened into a jagged reminder that trust can shatter quietly without warning. The people around him didn't know what to say. Some avoided his eyes, others offered hollow reassurances, and a few just stood frozen, unsure whether to comfort him or stay silent. And while no explosive confession was made, The tension in the room told him everything. Something had changed. Something had been hidden, and whether or not the rumors were true, the bond he relied on had already cracked. His anger didn't erupt outward, turned inward, heavy and suffocating. As he tried to process how quickly certainty had turned into chaos, the fallout wasn't dramatic in movement, but in emotion, a quiet collapse of trust. A cold realization that nothing would ever feel as simple or innocent as it once had. When he finally walked out of that room, his expression was different, harder, distant, guarded, like someone who had aged years in minutes. And even though he didn't speak a word to anyone, the shift was obvious. The cast felt it, the crew sensed it, and the air around him carried a weight that made people step back instinctively. In that moment, Mendeecees wasn't just dealing with a rumor, he was confronting the unthinkable. The possibility that loyalty had failed him, that truth had been twisted, and that the world he trusted had quietly collapsed long before he ever knew it was breaking. The moment the slightest hint of confrontation leaked beyond the set, the internet detonated with the force of a cultural earthquake, transforming a once-contained rumor into a global spectacle that no one could escape. Hashtags appeared within minutes first, a trickle. Then a flood climbing trends lists across platforms as millions of users scrambled to understand what was happening. Memes surfaced almost instantly, turning fragments of expressions, screenshots, and vague statements into viral content that spread faster than the actual story itself. Fan accounts became battlegrounds, with divided factions arguing fiercely as one side defended Mendeecees with unwavering loyalty, while the other demanded answers, receipts, and accountability. Comment sections turned into war zones filled with theories, sarcasm, emotional confessions, and heated debates that spiraled into thousands of replies within hours. Every tiny update, reel, or imagine was treated like breaking news, amplified by influencers, gossip bloggers, reaction channels, and live stream analysts who dissected every second as if they were covering a national crisis. Even mainstream media couldn't resist. Headlines began popping up globally, each more dramatic than the last, feeding a frenzy that blurred the line between entertainment and obsession. The algorithms pushed the story into feeds of people who had never even heard of the cast, creating a snowball effect where curiosity morphed into mass fascination. Fans launched polls, started investigative threads, and created timelines mapping out every digital breadcrumb, convinced they were uncovering the truth in real time. Meanwhile, silence from the people involved only fueled the fire. Every unposted picture, every delayed statement, every unfollow was treated like coded confirmation that something monumental was unfolding behind closed doors. Celebrities weighed in, cryptic posts appeared, and parody accounts added chaos to the confusion, making the situation feel surreal, almost cinematic. Suddenly, this wasn't just a fan base issue, it was a global conversation stretching across time zones, languages and cultures, uniting strangers in collective shock while simultaneously tearing communities apart. And as the story reached every corner of the internet, one reality became undeniable. This moment had spiraled far beyond rumor. The world was watching, waiting, and demanding answers, transforming a whisper into a wildfire that no one, not even Mendeecees himself, could control anymore. As the online wildfire raged and rumors turned into relentless noise, the shockwaves finally hit the most fragile and personal corner of Mendeecees' life, his marriage, pushing a once private bond into a public pressure chamber where every breath felt like evidence and every silence sounded like confession. What began as quiet tension at home soon evolved into something heavier. As late-night conversations grew shorter, eye contact faded, and the emotional distance between husband and wife widened into a void neither of them knew how to bridge. The trust that once felt unshakable now trembled under the weight of speculation, and even though no one had spoken the word divorce aloud, it lingered like an uninvited shadow in every room. Behind closed doors, legal whispers began circulating, questions about prenups, Assets, custody, and consequences fueled not by decisions already made, but by the terrifying possibility that the foundation of their marriage was cracking faster than they could repair it. Mendeecees, overwhelmed by the chaos, found himself seeking quiet counsel, calling confidants, speaking with advisors, and asking questions he never thought he'd have to ask. Not because he wanted out, but because he suddenly wasn't sure what was still real, what was salvageable, or what damage had already been done. Meanwhile, the public watched with ruthless fascination, tracking every ringless photo, every unfollow, every change in body language like forensic evidence of an impending breakup. Friends who once felt like allies now seemed divided, some urging patience and privacy, others warning him to prepare for impact. At home, conversations grew tense, layered with hurt and misunderstanding. As both partners struggled to separate truth from rumor, emotion from fear, loyalty from survival, every question sounded accusatory. Every answer felt insufficient. And the marriage that once felt like a safe harbor now felt like a battlefield where neither side knew how to surrender without losing themselves. And yet, beneath the anger and confusion, there was grief, the quiet kind. Born not from betrayal itself, but from the realization that their relationship was no longer protected from the world's intrusion. The possibility of separation, once unthinkable, now hovered unspoken but painfully real. As paperwork, legal terms, and whispered advice began circling like storm clouds waiting for the final strike, Mendeecees stood at a crossroads, torn between defending his marriage publicly, navigating his own private heartbreak, and preparing for outcomes he never imagined facing. In that fragile space, one truth became unavoidable: whether or not the rumors were true. The marriage itself had been pushed to the edge, and stepping back from that ledge would require more than love. It would require truth, clarity, and a strength neither of them was sure they still had left. As the chaos escalated and the story spiraled beyond anyone's control, Yandy suddenly found herself thrust into the brutal center of public scrutiny, becoming a lightning rod for judgment, speculation, and pressure she never asked for but couldn't escape. Overnight, her name flooded timelines, headlines, and comment sections as strangers dissected her every move, tone, facial expression, and silence, turning her life into a public trial where millions acted as judge and jury. Interviews she once handled with effortless professionalism now felt like emotional minefields, each question sharper than the last, crafted not to inform but to provoke, fishing for cracks, reactions, or confessions. Even when she tried to stay composed, the exhaustion showed tight smiles, parted answers, and pauses heavy enough to reveal the weight she was carrying. Her social media became a battleground. Supporters demanded transparency, critics hurled blame, and trolls flooded her pages with accusations, forcing her to choose between responding and fueling the fire or staying silent and appearing guilty. PR teams scrambled to craft statements, managers urged caution, and producers pushed for clarity to protect the show. But no matter what she said or didn't say, the narrative kept slipping further from her grasp. The stress seeped into every corner of her life. Sleepless nights, missed calls, and emotional breakdowns hidden behind closed doors as she tried to hold herself together while the world picked her apart. The pressure to defend her marriage, her character, and her dignity simultaneously became suffocating, especially as clips from old episodes resurfaced, twisted out of context to paint her as insecure, controlling, or blindsided. Friends she trusted offered conflicting advice, some urging her to fight publicly, others warning her to keep quiet, leaving her more isolated than ever. And every time she stepped in front of a camera, she wasn't just a woman navigating pain. She was a headline waiting to happen. The cruelest part was realizing that the truth no longer mattered as much as perception. People weren't looking for facts, they were looking for drama, confirmation, and someone to blame. Yandy tried to regain control, posting carefully worded statements, hinting at strength and composure, but even those were torn apart, reinterpreted, and used to fuel new theories. the harder she fought to steer the narrative, the faster it slipped through her fingers, proving that she wasn't just under scrutiny. She was trapped in a storm built by strangers, amplified by media, and powered by a world that cared more about the spectacle than her humanity. And in that relentless spotlight, one truth became painfully clear. Yandy wasn't just reacting to a rumor, she was battling a public that demanded answers she wasn't ready, willing, or even able to give. As the narrative twisted and the rumor grew new branches by the hour, an unexpected name surged into the spotlight, Travis shifting the story in a direction no one saw coming and painting him as the newest focal point of suspicion. At first, his involvement seemed minimal, almost irrelevant. It's just a background presence in a drama already overflowing with tension. But the internet has a way of magnifying shadows. And soon, small details, private conversations, off-camera moments, subtle exchanges were dragged into the open and dissected as if they held the key to everything. Fans began circulating clips where Travis appeared unusually tense, unusually quiet, or unusually close to the situation, fueling theories that he knew more than he was letting on. Screenshots of old messages, blurry photos, and cryptic posts suddenly resurfaced, reinterpreted through a lens of suspicion that turned harmless interactions into possible evidence. People started questioning why he was always nearby when tensions peaked, why his tone shifted in recent interviews, and why he seemed to be orbiting the heart of the rumor instead of distancing himself from it. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder, claims that Travis had private talks with key players, late-night meetings, and conversations that ended abruptly when others walked into the room. Cast members exchanged nervous glances whenever his name came up, and even those who once trusted him began watching his movements with quiet unease, unsure whether he was a confidant, a catalyst, or something far more calculated. Online analysts built timelines connecting his appearances and decisions to the unfolding chaos, suggesting that his involvement wasn't accidental but intentional, as though he might have played a role in escalating the situation or stood to gain from its fallout. Some speculated he was offering emotional support, others believed he was manipulating dynamics behind the scenes, and a growing faction insisted he was hiding a motive no one had uncovered yet. Travis' silence only made things worse. Instead of quelling the storm, it fueled it, allowing the public to fill in the blanks with their own darkest assumptions. Every step he took, every post he made or didn't make was interpreted as a clue. And suddenly, he wasn't just part of the narrative. He was driving it. His reputation shifted overnight from trusted associate to potential instigator, a figure whose intentions were now under a microscope so intense that even innocence looked suspicious. As speculation mounted and the pressure tightened, one unsettling reality took hold both online and behind the scenes. Travis was no longer a background character in this unfolding drama. He had become the question everyone wanted answered, the variable no one could read, the presence no one could ignore, and the center of suspicion that suggested the story was far more complicated than anyone originally believed. What had once been a workspace built on routine, professionalism, and controlled chaos erupted into something far more volatile, transforming the set into a battlefield where emotions replaced scripts and every interaction felt like a spark waiting to ignite. The tension that had been simmering for days finally boiled over as explosive arguments broke out in hallways, dressing rooms, and even mid-rehearsal, with cast members shouting accusations, defending secrets, and unleashing frustrations that had been festering beneath forced smiles. Crew members scrambled to keep cameras rolling, or, in some cases, hurriedly shut them off to prevent sensitive moments from becoming viral ammunition. But their efforts only underscored how quickly order was slipping away. People who had once worked seamlessly together now collided like opposing forces, raising voices, pointing fingers, and storming off set in emotional outbursts that left producers stunned and scrambling. Tears became as common as take numbers, cast members breaking down behind locked doors, makeup artists trying to comfort them, and directors watching helplessly as the emotional fabric of the production unraveled in real time. Scenes were delayed, Call times were ignored, and entire shooting schedules collapsed as no one could focus long enough to get through a single take without tension erupting. Rumors fueled paranoia. Paranoia fueled conflict. And conflict fueled a level of chaos that made even minor misunderstandings explode into full-blown confrontations. Some cast members refused to share scenes, others demanded new contracts or temporary removal from filming, and a few simply walked out without warning, leaving producers to negotiate, mediate, and beg for cooperation while the clock-hand budgets spiraled out of control. Headsets buzzed with frantic instructions, security was called to intervene in heated moments, and crew members whispered about whether the show could even continue under such emotional strain. The set no longer felt like a creative space, but a war zone, divided into factions, alliances, and silent rivalries, where trust was gone and self-protection ruled. Every slammed door, every raised voice, and every trembling breath made one thing undeniable. This wasn't just drama for the cameras, it was real, raw, and dangerously close to collapse. And as the production buckled beneath the weight of chaos, the terrifying question lingered in everyone's mind: was the show falling apart? Or were the people at the center of it breaking long before the cameras ever caught it? As the days stretched on, the tension on the set reached a level that no one could ignore or walk away from, creating a storm that engulfed everyone involved: cast, crew, and even fans watching from afar. The conflict remained unresolved, simmering just beneath the surface while every interaction, every glance, and every word became a potential spark, threatening to ignite further chaos. Yandy and Mendeecees tried to navigate their fractured relationship, but the pressure of public scrutiny, media speculation, and lingering rumors made even private moments feel impossible to manage. Travis' presence continued to fuel suspicion, keeping everyone on edge, while the cast struggled to maintain professionalism amid an atmosphere thick with unease, whispered debates, and subtle power shifts. Production challenges multiplied, as directors and crew had to balance capturing authentic drama for the cameras with diffusing explosive arguments and emotional breakdowns that threatened to derail filming entirely. Meanwhile, fans remained ravenous, dissecting every clip, meme, and interview, their engagement intensifying the pressure on the key players and magnifying the emotional stakes. The marriage, already teetering, faced new tests with every misunderstanding, every calculated glance, and every social media post, while private discussions between Yandy, Mendeecees, and Travis added fuel to the unrelenting fire of speculation. Alliances formed and fractured, loyalties were questioned, and the emotional toll on everyone involved became undeniable, leaving visible traces in tense expressions, abrupt exits, and strained performances. It was clear that the storm was no longer just a personal or professional challenge, had become an inescapable force, a whirlwind of rumor, emotion, and consequence that refused to settle. Even the most minor incidents became magnified, interpreted as evidence, a confession or proof of shifting dynamics, and no one could step outside its reach. With cameras rolling, fans watching, and personal relationships hanging by a thread, every choice carried consequences, and every decision risked igniting yet another wave of controversy. The unresolved tensions left everyone guessing, anxious, and bracing for what was coming next, while the show's narrative became a labyrinth of suspense, betrayal, and emotional complexity that no one could predict. And just when it seemed the storm might subside, a new twist loomed on the horizon, hinting at revelations, confrontations, and consequences yet to come, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats and proving that in the world of love and hip-hop, no one, not cast, crew, or fans, could escape the storm that was only growing stronger.